So before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territories of the First Nations and Native American peoples. Here where I am in Vancouver, those peoples are the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. But I know where many of you are, you're on the land of other nations. Always, but especially during this difficult time, let us remember our connection to our sisters and brothers in these nations and pray for the day in which we might be with them in right relationship. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kathy Merchant. I think I know almost everybody, or maybe there are a few folks I don't know. So I'm the interfaith leader and founder of the Living Interfaith Sanctuary. We're an interfaith congregation that started out in Vancouver, and now we live online, like all the other congregations. And we celebrate whatever religion has a holiday, which is very fun. And then over time, blessedly, we have met community interfaith organizer Harold Rosen, and he teaches many, many amazing things. And so this is going to be the second series we're doing with him. He's put everything together. I just do the tech. He's the genius behind all this. And so our last one last year was a World Scripture series where every month we studied the sacred text from a different tradition for 11 months, which was amazing. And this one is now on women mystics. So Harold, over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Delighted you're here. I'm just going to talk a little bit about this course for a while and looking at the first 2 pages a little bit. And I think I've given you something like 7 pages to copy. I'm hoping you have those. We're not going to try to cover all of those because I want to have lots of discussion. I'd like to just alight on a few of the things that are there and see what some of your reactions are. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in a certain way using that page that I called Major Functions or Dimensions or Provisions of Religion as a Whole. In other words, features of religions. Some of them may be more important to us than others. That's what I'd like us to sort of get a sense of, which part of religion interests us. This course is looking at spiritual growth as one of the 9 major dimensions of religions mentioned on that page. But I'm going to discuss those very quickly and just ask you if you identify or find more interesting 1, 2, or 3 of those and sort of introduce yourself in that way. And I'll try to be a model of that and ask Kathy to do that too. This course, why have a course in women mystics? A little bit of my own background. I have, for the longest time, maybe most of my life, I've had the view that women in North American culture tend to get socialized in terms of relationships and intimacy dynamics, and that has showed up in terms of women's spirituality. That is, women seem to have had a lot of talents, you might say, spiritual capacity in terms of intimacy with the Creator. So that's a belief I have, that there's a good reason why women, in spite of the patriarchal history, certain women have stepped up and been very foundational and important in the area of mysticism. So I picked out 10 women mystics that have been important throughout the last 2,500 years. And they represent different traditions, even if it's the same religion. Different traditions of major religions. And so this should be a very interesting look. So as to my motivation again, women, I think, have brought some very special, perceptions and intuitions to the whole mystical arena. And that's why some of the writing of women mystics has been fantastic. In the first page, if you look at in my bibliography, I list a book there called Mysticism, A Study in the Nature of Man's Spiritual Consciousness by Evelyn Underhill. That is a truly amazing book. It was written in the early 1900s, and it's sold like hotcakes ever since. Rarely does a book last that long, like over 100 years, the same book, unedited. Is because she studied the writing of women mystics, mostly in the West, but not exclusively in the West. And she had a special literary ability, Evelyn Underhill, to kind of focus on the essence of their writing, the essence of their spiritual insight. So she collects fantastic language, you might say, from mystics in general and women mystics in particular. I wrote the course description there saying we're going to look at 10 outstanding women of history, and they're all utterly amazing. Like each one will be your favorite. Incredible courage, incredible insight, incredible eloquence these women had, and enormous courage too. And they had an impact on their times, and they had a tendency to look at humanity's potential, a sort of a futuristic and a sort of a positive emphasis. Okay, so I described the 10 sessions there, and you've probably looked at those. Later on today, we're going to look at Srimala, a Buddhist queen who was a contemporary of the Buddha. What an amazing story. Lucky that we have Kathy, who has special insights about Mahayana Buddhism, because what this Queen Srimala wrote is a major text of Mahayana Buddhism, especially around this idea of the universal Buddha nature. What an amazingly powerful concept. Then we'll look at Hypatia of Alexandria in Egypt. She was a great scientist, mathematician, and Neoplatonic mystic. Rabia of Basra in Iraq. She'll give us a good excuse to get a sense of early Sufism. Hildegard of Bingen is almost a household word in Europe. She was sort of lost to history for 800 years and then got rediscovered about 3 decades ago. And her music, her writings are selling like hotcakes in Europe, and they started to in North America as well. Julian of Norwich is truly amazing mystic too, another Christian mystic, different feel than either Hildegard on one hand or Teresa of Avila on the other, who we'll look at. Mirabai is in India. She was a contemporary with the early Sikh movement, and some of the egalitarian spirit of Sikhism is visible in what she did and what she wrote. She was a musician, a poet. We'll look at some of her writing. Tahirih of Persia was a Baha'i martyr and a brilliant woman theologically and poetically. I bumped into people that knew her poetry just because it was brilliant poetry, like a guy from Pakistan and another guy from India had heard about Tahirih's poetry, her mystical writings. We'll look at her. Mirra Alfassa, she's the newest one I put on the list. She was associated with Aurobindo and Pondicherry in southern India. And then we'll close the course with looking at Barbara Marx Hubbard. You could call her a New Age mystic. You could call her a futuristic visionary. She passed away only last year. I was wondering if she was going to be the only living member of the group we were studying. I was going to invite her to come when we talked about her, but we've outlived her. At the bottom of page 1, I tried to give you a simplified bibliography. If you read only one book related to these 10 women, what would that book be? That's what I was asking myself. And so I put that book there for you to check out if you're interested in more detail. You know, the titles I've given these women, I think there's a lot to them. So I just want to go over them again. Srimala, we're calling her a Buddhist teacher of universal light. Buddhist teacher of universal light. She happened to have been a queen in a small kingdom, but we'll go into those details. Hypatia, Neoplatonist philosopher and martyr. Rabia, Sufi, poet, saint, teacher, and counselor. Hildegard, medieval Christian earth-centered theologian. You know, some of you may have heard of creation-centered spirituality. Matthew Fox is famous for that. So that type of outlook, Hildegard's an enormously good representative of it. Mirabai, Hindu devotee of divine love. Teresa of Avila, Catholic reformer and guide to the interior castle. What a brilliant name that's her book, Guide to the Interior Castle. Wow. Tahirih, Baha'i poet, visionary, and martyr. She had a sort of collective humanity or we orientation. quite strong. Mirra Alfassa, the mother, she's known to most people in history, the mother, spiritual visionary and ashram founder. Barbara Marx Hubbard, futurist advocate and of conscious evolution. Okay, friends, could you look at page 2? I'm looking there. There's some more reasons why to focus on women mystics, and I tried to sort of, summarize some of the reasons. I find the language of the women mystics very clear, and I've read a lot of mystics, and not all of them are clear, but somehow women say things a little more with a little more relational aspects to it. So it's easier for me to grasp. And I think it makes for an excellent sort of entryway into looking at mysticism and spirituality in general. There's a lot of different ways we could have taught a course like this. And I wanted to just sort of mention, I'm taking sort of a history of ideas approach. We're looking at their ideas. We're looking at a little bit of a psychosocial approach. We're trying to learn about who these women were, how they functioned the way they did. A little bit of a literary approach, trying to get a sense of what they wrote, and a comparative religions approach too, because we're on purpose looking for women that represent many different religious perspectives, but all of them mystical. I want to make a distinction real quick. I made this up, an I mystic and a we mystic. So an I mystic would focus on the individual interior, what's inside and the individual. A we mystic would be focusing on humanity as a whole. And some of the mystics seem to me are both I and we together. So I call them I-we mystics, and some are mostly I, some are mostly we. It's all very balanced. It seems to me, for example, Srimala is an I-we mystic, both I-we. Same thing with Hypatia. Rabia is the good example of an I mystic looking deep within. Hildegard is the ultimate we mystic. Julian, Mirabai, and Teresa are all strong I mystics. Tahirih, another strong we mystic, looking at humanity's spiritual potential. Mirra Alfassa, I call her an I-we mystic because she's balancing them. And then it looks to me like Barbara Marx Hubbard is a very we-oriented or collective humanity-oriented. Okay, so you see that that's one way of distinguishing types of mysticism. Now, look at the middle of page 2. This is Harold's quick theory of history. You could divide all of humanity's time on Earth in 3 different pieces. The first piece was up until about 6,000 years ago. You could call that the age of dependence, like human beings were dependent on the earth. And during that time, women had prominent roles. The evidence seems to suggest that the human societies were matrifocal and egalitarian. Then the last 6,000 years, we could call that history. It turns very patriarchal, very hierarchical. And now I think we're in the 3rd period of history. We're beginning the 3rd big piece of history now, and I call that the age of interdependence with the earth. So in other words, at first we were totally dependent on the earth. Then we tried to conquer the earth through 6,000 years of history and dominate the earth. Now we better become more interdependent with the earth. And I think gender relations will change. Women and men are moving into egalitarianism again, I believe, in a profound way. Okay, so that's Harold's quick theory of history, but that sort of says why it's important to look at women mystics. Women's angle on spirituality is more needed as we're moving into an interdependent worldview for humanity. And I know that might be a pipe dream. Maybe I'm just saying what I would like to happen. I would like us to become more interdependent. I think we're sort of being forced to by global developments. Okay, now can you quickly look at that list of 9 major functions? And I'm not going into much detail on this. I'm only doing this for a certain reason. I'm trying to point out where mysticism fits. I have here 9 different aspects of religion or functions or dimensions. And look at number 5 first. It's spiritual growth, intimacy with our Creator, individual prayer, meditation and contemplation, mystical awareness, understanding and application. So we're looking at that dimension as developed by 10 women who are important. Now, but that dimension is connected to other dimensions like communal devotion, for example. Oh, a hand is up. Okay, Joan, please. Joan, can you unmute? Yeah.
Yeah, I just did. I don't seem to have all of what you're talking about, and I'm not sure. I printed out the first day, but my pages don't seem to relate to what.
That's okay. So it looks like this. I can also share it if that'd be helpful. It looks like this one.
That would be really helpful because I don't have that.
No problem. Here, I'm going to screen share. Is that okay, Harold? Let me just open it.
Yes. Okay. All right.
Sorry. I don't know. Maybe I didn't send you the right thing, friends.
Yeah, I think
It's one of the pages I sent you too, Joan.
Okay.
Major functions.
No, I haven't had a minute to print it all off. So.
Okay, let's just look at this.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm not going into detail, but the foundational teachings means what did the founder of the faith actually say? So that's the study of scripture, theology, philosophy, et cetera, et cetera. Societal transformation is what did they propose that could change the world? Okay, so it's saving our world, that dimension, promoting faith, et cetera. Authoritative organization, how did the religion get set up in terms of its structure? Fourth is communal devotion or worship. How do people readily in a public way come together? Spiritual growth is what I was just describing, another important dimension that the mystics really focus on. Service and outreach, how does the religious tradition as a whole take care of people, do good deeds, compassion in action? That has a familiar ring to it. I think we had a conference recently on that topic. Service and outreach. Personal healing. You know, some people, this is the whole point of religion. It has to heal the soul. It has to mend brokenness. 8, rites and rituals. This means all the ceremonies, all the holy days, the shrines, the monuments, the spirit quests, the pilgrimages. And then the sacred arts. My goodness, what a huge field that is. Look at these are just some of them: music, chanting, singing, dance, drama, painting, iconography, symbols, sculpture, journaling, literature, poetry, calligraphy, architecture. In other words, the arts respond to religion and develop. So these are 9 major aspects of religion. If you could go back so we could look at 5, spiritual growth. So this is what we're looking at. This course is specialized in this. I'm not meaning to suggest this is the only part of religion, but it's an important part. Some people would say it's the essence. For some people, this is their favorite part or the only part that means anything. I wonder if we could quickly go back and introduce ourselves in terms of these. Like, for example, I'm introducing myself, Harold Rosen. The first 2 are important to me, and 5 and 6 are important to me especially. So I've tried to learn a lot about the foundational teachings of the major religions. And how are they trying to change the world? The goals they have for global transformation. And then I've also looked a lot at spiritual growth. How do they describe the process of spiritual growth and nurture it? And then how do they encourage people to make this a better world through good deeds, through some kind of outreach? So those are the 4 dimensions that are most interesting to me. However, I acknowledge that all of those are part of religion, and I'm interested in the whole of religion as well. Okay, Kathy, can you introduce yourself in terms of these categories?
Yes. So I think for me, probably 2 and 5 are the most important, and then 6 as well. So very much Like I usually say that I'm a mystic and an activist.
Yes, practical feet.
So
Mystic with practical feet.
I've studied about how the two work together, where you do the mystical journey or like the spiritual journey in yourself, and that helps ground you. But if you, the theory is if you stay there, then you can be kind of too navel gazing. So then you want to do the activism, which is more of the societal transformation. So I find trying to balance those two has been a lifelong thing for me.
Excellent. Yeah, you're the very incarnation of that balancing, I think. Okay, now Joan, can you introduce yourself quickly based on these, and then we'll go back and look at all the faces again. But we'll keep these here to remind you. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, Kathy, can you minimize it so that we can see all of them at the same, use your view and make it a little smaller?
Oh, there it is. That's it.
How's that? Is that good?
That's it.
Thanks.
Perfect.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
Joan, would you be willing to introduce yourself? Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Joan. Sorry.
I would be happy to, except that I haven't had much time to look at it. So maybe I could pass
Okay,
and then come
Yeah.
back.
that's premature. I'm sorry.
That's
Okay,
okay.
let's go back to can we go back to the whole page or the gallery view then, Kathy? Yeah. Okay, anyone else want to, let me call
but
on
I
people.
can't see it. I'm
Oh.
sorry. I'm sorry. I don't have the page. So
Yeah, right now, Joan, we're introducing ourselves and people are just going to say a little bit about who they are in terms of those categories. Okay, Sally.
Yeah, my name is Sally Mark Antonio. 2, 5, and 6 are the ones that really sort of resonate with me. I started going to I came back to a church after about 40 years because I like what they did, the outreach, and it just seemed to fit with me, the things that we do, And yeah, I also enjoy the community aspect of it in the congregation, but we haven't had that for 2 years, and so I think that's about it. I don't have the page either, but that's from memory of what we were just looking at.
Okay.
I know it was
So
2.
5 is spiritual growth. I'm assuming if everyone, if people took this course, that's probably one of your interests, right?
Yeah.
That's probably safe to say. Okay,
Yes.
let's keep it here so that people can see them. Okay,
Okay.
sorry. Yeah. All right, I'll call on other people then. Bev, willing to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I came into my current spiritual journey, I guess, through personal healing, seeking personal healing, and then very soon realizing I had a gift for healing energy. And so that led me into more spiritual growth and eventually into leading prayers and guided meditations. And my whole interest even now is to help people, especially who haven't learned to meditate, to have a moment where they actually feel the connection of a divine energy. And then I think my interest is a societal transformation, which would result in service. But I think I'm more interested in the step before the personal service that leads to the personal service. So that's where I am.
Oh, that's beautiful. That makes perfect sense. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Maria, willing to introduce yourself? Please unmute.
Yeah, that's one of the steps. Well, I am definitely interested in spiritual growth, and I have a big interest in personal healing and in assisting others with personal healing. That's one of my life purposes, I think. And I'm very interested in the sacred arts. I like all the things in creative expression to be used as part of an upliftment and an expression of our connection and our role as humans, kind of to be this bridge between the sacred and the physical. And I like this idea of societal transformation as a step before the service, because I feel like I want to encourage people to be the light that they can be, so that we can together work for a better world. And but I'm not advocating specific outreach steps or, starting a project or joining a project. It's more like inspiration and commitment to a path. And I'm looking forward to more communal devotion, especially once we get off Zoom.
Yeah. Well, Zoom, we've been trying to have Zoom communal devotion, but yeah, people are hungering for the face-to-face, heart-to-heart. Sorry. Oh, you were saying more. Maria, this is beautiful. Your interests are probably very closely connected to your capacities. You're interested in these things and probably have a lot of ability in them.
Well, I guess we do play to our strengths, and
Exactly.
but it's also really good to realize, I could use a little more foundational teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all fascinating. This is a great organizational outline. Thank you.
Oh, I'm glad you like it. I've spent a lot of time trying to, the reason, I'm trying to sort of be a diplomat and understand all aspects of all religions. And so not that I can completely grasp all of these things, but I see that they're at work. These are at work in the growth and development, and sometimes even in the corruption of religion, right? Sometimes these things can go bad, right, as well. Yeah, Joan, would you be willing to, do these make enough sense to you to use to introduce yourself?
They certainly make sense, I guess. Yes, and so I'm Joan Morris, and I guess for me, the 4, 5, and 6 are the areas that I would be most attuned to. I've appreciated the opportunity to have group worship, but like others have said, with the Zoom meetings, they haven't been as satisfying. And then the spiritual growth is something that I've searched through and worked on for years. And I'm always really pleased to be part of the Unitarian movement with their service and outreach aspect. Not that I've been able to be there myself always, but it's something that I feel is very important. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's all true. I know her from many years. She's been very involved in those dimensions, actually, in one way or the other. Okay, because I'm an educator, that's why number 1 is important to me. I'm sort of, to understand a religion, I've tried to go back to what were the foundational principles taught by the conceiver or founder of the religion, and what is the actual station of those teachings. Do they have special power because they came from a figure who was slightly more than human? So those sort of theological questions have always fascinated me. But how all these areas interconnect, for example, Hildegard of Bingen, all of the women we're studying are very strong in this 5, spiritual growth, in articulating that and describing it and being exemplars of that. But Hildegard really flourished in the sacred arts. She wrote the first thing that could be called a morality play or a musical. She invented a musical instrument that's sort of like a harpsichord. So in other words, she was a polymath, a competent woman who developed several of these areas. She also went heavy into theology, earth-centered or creation-centered theological outlook. So she sort of, was connected to several of these. Some of the women we're going to study were counselors, right? They worked with people who are suffering. They worked with people, in the personal healing mode, like some of you have described. That was their strength. For example, Rabia, we'll see. The strength of these women attracted people to them. They had something that people wanted. Okay, let's now, can we go back to the faces in the gallery view? I want to continue. I'm looking at pages, my page 2 and 3 describe a little bit about mysticism.
There are a few more folks who haven't introduced themselves.
Oh, You're right. Oh, of course. You know something? I only saw 6 faces over here.
Oh, yeah. No, so I think
okay.
Sheila's next up.
Okay, let's, I'm delighted. Who wants Sue? You're black and
Oh,
white.
wait, here,
I
Sheila
know,
first.
I'm so sorry. There's something wrong with my camera.
We'll call on you later when it's looking better. Linda,
Well,
can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Sue Bright from the Baha'i community, so I know Harold, and I've taken this course before, but I'm sure it's going to be different this time. But I love the Women Mystics course, and the things that I'm with Kathy, like I like was it social transformation, and I like personal healing. Like they're all good, of course, but I think we all want to become more spiritual or have spiritual growth, but we also want society to, the Baha'is talk about material and spiritual progress for all the world. So, and I think women, because the equality of men and women is huge in Baha'i faith, I think women mystics are holding the torch. So way to go, Harold.
Thank you so much, Sue. Okay, yeah, I'm delighted. I thought it was just 6 people. Okay, that's right. More people. Sheila, would you be willing to introduce yourself? Please unmute.
Sure. My name is Sheila, and I am on the unceded territories of the Kwakwaka'wakw people, Northern Vancouver Island, and I am Cree from Plains Cree from Achakakoop Cree Nation in Saskatchewan. So I would say communal devotion because in Indigenous worldview, our independence and our strength is fortified first within community, and you're cherished as an individual within the community. And so with that, you are raised with your foundational teachings, and which you know involves the sacred arts, involves rites and rituals. So what's neat about this list for me is that when you know the Indigenous way to walk, my understanding as an Indigenous woman is that when I'm walking with my ancestors, and I'm walking with 7 generations ahead of me. So it's a constant in and out of these tenets, and of course with assimilation, it's you know speaking to these things. It's a path of personal healing, and I think for me, societal transformation. These things are huge concepts for me when you're healing in public. And so as an Indigenous woman, I find that it's the idea of resilience, and it's the idea of remaining, even though you don't feel you can. Sometimes I don't feel I can. I'm like, I throw in the towel regularly, sometimes 5 times a day. So yeah, so all of these things permeating your in and out. And I find the Zoom community has saved me this last year. It's been very hard. And the Zoom community has been there just fabulously. So thank you.
You know, I'm looking back at these categories so differently now, but just because of what you shared. All my relations, that's a deep connector to communal devotion. That's a new way of thinking about it. Societal transformation as part of healing all my relations. Oh my goodness. Personal healing, always starting from inside the middle of the medicine wheel and going out. Anyway, yeah, that fascinating. Okay, who else has not introduced themselves that is willing? Can I call on you, Sonia? Would you be willing to introduce yourself? Please unmute. Oh, Sonia, you're muted. You're muted.
Hi, I'm Sonia Chang. Nice to meet you. I can recognize some of the faces. That's good. Yeah, I'm from Korea. I've been living in Vancouver as an immigrant for about 18 years. before that, I studied for my master's degree in US. So I have lived in North America for like 23 years, which will be, yeah, still I think I lived in Korea longer, but I'm, yeah. So that's my background, and my background is Christianity, but I'm becoming more and more interested in Eastern philosophy, Eastern spirituality, which was kind of abandoned and rejected while I was raised in Christian church in Korea. But I'm really interested in, and there are so many common so many shared ideas and perspective, and I'm really interested in like incorporating Western thinking and Eastern thinking, and yeah, some kind of spirituality topic. So when I heard about this class, I was just thrilled that, oh, this is what I exactly wanted to know or to attend. So
How lovely. We're lucky to have you. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you so much. Yeah. Linda, would you be willing to unmute and introduce yourself? Thank you, Sonia.
Yes, my name is Linda Mackay, and it was Heidi Schmidt who sent the link to me. And I also listened to you when we had a program at West Vancouver United Church, and you were taking part in that. And so I'm inspired. I'm inspired by your name and your reputation and your presentations, but also when she sent it and it was about the women mystics, I thought, oh, this is right up my alley. I just love this. I've read quotes from various people, and I thought, oh my gosh, I want to know more about those women. And also, sometimes I feel like a mystic myself because of I don't mean this to sound conceited, but visions that come to me, or your relationship with God, and so just that kind of connection between those women and myself and my own personal spiritual experience. That appealed to me a lot. I coordinate a Bible study group at West Vancouver United Church just as a lay person. I have no expertise or background or anything. It's just a little study group, and right now we're going to study Genesis, which we're starting next Monday. And so, I mean, just this week when I started to do that study, there were just so many things that came to me about humanity and God's creation of humanity. And that means all of humanity, right? Adam represents all of humanity. And so I just love the aspect of the interfaith community. And I also practice transcendental meditation. And so all of these little pieces, which seemed separate to me. And when I started transcendental meditation, I was very hesitant because I thought, oh my gosh, does this fit in with my Christian tradition? And so, of course, now, after many years of doing this, I find that all of these things come together and just weave with one another.
How beautiful. Oh my goodness. The book I mentioned early on, Evelyn Underhill's book on mysticism, I have a feeling you would love it because of the language. She really, focuses on the beautiful, uplifting language of women mystics, especially Christian mystics like Hildegard and Julian of Norwich, right? And Teresa of Avila. Okay, let's get everyone else introduced. Samantha, Sheila, you willing to introduce yourself?
Sam is the last one.
What? Oh, Sheila is? Yeah.
No, Sheila spoke. I think it's Sam is the last.
Oh, what am I talking about? Of course. Okay, Samantha, Sam.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, my screen will slow down my.
Oh, you're opting for sound over sight. Okay.
Exactly. So, basically, I would say spiritual growth is huge for me. I love the foundational teachings and want to get to know them more. Societal transformation is definitely big on my list. communal devotion as along with the sacred arts, because I like having the arts expressed by, like, I've worked with youth, and watching them express themselves through the art actually brings the community together. The rites and rituals are really big on my list. Personal healing, and all of it wrapped around service and outreach. So almost everything.
You didn't leave anything out, I noticed. My goodness, except for authoritative organization.
Yeah, that's where I have a problem.
It can easily get corrupt. You know, it has a bad name, you know, in many people's minds because of what happened in history. Okay, thank you. So is everyone introduced now? Everyone? Okay, friends, I want to describe what let's move into talking about Srimala. And again, I'm delighted that Kathy is with us because I think some of the concepts, let me try to make a complicated thing as simple as I can. This woman, what she's famous for is the idea of universal Buddha nature. Universal Buddha nature. So the idea, as I understand it, is that everyone has awakening potential. Awakening potential, not awakening actual. To get to awakening actual, you have to go through some processes and some awarenesses and maybe some understanding and some disciplines and that sort of thing, some practice. This is enlightenment capacity. Everyone is born with enlightenment capacity and it can be nurtured. And another way to put this is the ability to attain wisdom and to bestow compassion. Wow, what a view of human nature, that there's this built-in thing called Buddha nature. Okay, now Queen Srimala, briefly, as I understand it, you know, so she's the queen of what, a kingdom, but a kingdom might be equivalent to, say, a state or a part of a state in modern day India. So it's a city with surrounding areas. Okay, and so what I have given you is an interpretive outline of this text, which is an actual scripture, the Lion's Roar of Queen Srimala. It's a piece of scripture, you know, that bears her name. The story, I call it the prologue. A royal family discovers the Buddha's new Dharma. So essentially that story, it's right there, and you may have looked at it, but Srimala's mother and father knew the Buddha and heard some talks, Dharma talks of the Buddha. They became Buddhist. And then they started talking about their daughter, Srimala. They said, you know, she is brilliant. She is such a receptive soul. I think she would understand this better than we do. Why don't we tell her about this? So they write a letter to their daughter, who's a queen, you know, married to a king. And immediately she reads this letter and completely grasps it. Like immediately she thinks she understands what the Buddha is getting at and how the Buddha nature is intrinsic. And because of our Buddha nature, we can understand the Buddha and implement his healing doctrine for the world, his compassion, his insights about the interdependent nature of reality, the fluid nature of reality. So that's the story, but there's more to the story. So she understands it, and then she invites the Buddha to come there, and he comes there both physically and in spirit. You have to suspend a little bit of disbelief just for some of this story. And so she's asking him, am I understanding you correctly? Is this what you're teaching? And the Buddha ends up saying, you're saying it even better than me. Keep on going. You know, so the Buddha becomes a cheerleader for Queen Srimala in a way. And then at the end of the story, it says the Buddha goes back and tells his own disciples some slightly new things. He said, you know, he says Srimala is talking about Buddha nature and making that foundational to a lot of her teaching. Wow. Okay. So now I should tell you this story, it came 800 years, it was composed 800 years after Srimala supposedly lived. So in some people's mind, oh, it took 800 years for them to write it down. Then how do we know that it's true? Skeptics can say that. You know, even some pretty sophisticated historians say this story is about half legendary and half historical. It is a fact that almost all the royal ladies, the queens of northern India, became Buddhist. A high percentage of them, that's been verified. So in other words, Buddhism had a lot of appeal to women. This is one of the conclusions because of its emphasis on compassion. Now, and then, so what Queen Srimala did is universalize compassion. We all have that ability. Oh my goodness. So, okay, so I've told you the story that's in the prologue. I'm gonna only read a couple of the summaries of certain, there's 15 chapters. We'll read about summaries of 6 of them, discuss those. And then on my last page, I gave some key concepts of Buddhism that were lifted up or given a slightly different look by Queen Srimala. Kathy, would you be willing to read what I call section 1 there? Chapter 1, section 1.
Yes. Section 1, praising the infinite merit of the Buddha. Srimala longed to meet the Buddha, and he suddenly appeared, both in his earthly body and his spiritual body. Srimala said, "Yours is the most beautiful form in the universe. Your wisdom is greater than any obstacle. You have comprehended everything. Please help me raise the seed of enlightenment." And the Buddha said, "I will always be there to help you. Nourish the kindness in your heart for all who suffer and cultivate the wisdom you've already gained. You will be known as the teacher of universal light."
You know, that's one heck of a beginning to this story. She's talking face to face to the Buddha, and he says to her, "You're going to be the teacher of universal light." That concept will be associated with your name, you know, throughout Buddhist history. And Buddhism, as you know, went all across Asia, started in India, goes across Asia, all parts of Asia, Southeast Asia, Korea, Japan, Tibet, Mongolia. Buddhism influenced a great many people and a great many cultures as it moved east. Okay, Kathy, what do you think about that start there? What is it? Any reactions?
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love the fact that he says, cultivate the wisdom you've already gained, so that she already understands it. And now how can you just like lean into that and even nourish the kindness in your heart? So it's very much leaning in, which I think is a very Buddhist thing. There's this idea that we're not putting things in there that don't already exist. If someone tells you something and it doesn't seem true to you, you don't have to believe it, even if it's part of the doctrine. You hold on to the parts that make sense to you. And so it makes a lot of sense, this idea of like nourishing and cultivating, and also that those are very more feminine kind of verbs, you know, and the fact that he's embracing this female teacher right away. I think that's really beautiful.
That alone is worth the price of admission. It's amazing, this the setup of the story, you know, the dignity of this woman in terms of, you know, some people say religions are all patriarchal. Well, the major religions have some patriarchal dimensions for sure, but this one is really showing a different angle on Buddhism. Okay, Kathy, I'll pick on you only once more, but can you read the section 2 also and comment on it? This is very important, this section here.
Okay, section 2, the 10 inconceivably great vows. Srimala says, "I vow to be moral, to be respectful, to seek equanimity, to practice generosity, to feel joy for the happiness of others." These first 5 vows were the ethical guidelines of the Theravada Buddhists, who emphasize self-effort and individual salvation. "I vow to share all my wealth, to never convert others for my own gain, to be a friend to the friendless, always remembering their pain, to eliminate destructive practices and reform corrupt practices, and to remember and teach the doctrine of the great vehicle." These last 5 vows were the ethical guidelines of the Mahayana Buddhists, emphasizing compassionate service and universal salvation.
This is utterly amazing too. You know, I've done a thought experiment. What if all the heads of state in the world would say these 10 things? You see, think of her as a head of state, right? She's a head of state, who happens to have read a letter about the Buddha's teachings from her parents and then thinks she gets it. And she immediately sees the importance of it. And she says, I'm all in. I'm all in with these, not only the ethical, affirmations, which are the first 5. The other ones are almost like collective spiritual affirmations. For example, one, can you imagine, I vow to share all my wealth, never to convert others for my own gain, to be a friend to the friendless, always remembering their pain, eliminate destructive practices and reform corrupt practices. So here's a head of state who recognizes that it doesn't always get set up fairly. And we have to, first of all, get rid of the corruption and reform and remember and teach the doctrine of the great vehicle. Okay, can you quickly look at the last page I've given you? The great vehicle it's on page, well, I shouldn't give a number. I'm just reading on the last page, which is a list of key concepts. The illustrious doctrine is called the great vehicle. It's the idea that everyone should be welcome to walk the path of enlightenment. Everyone. It should be inclusive. So this is Mahayana Buddhism. Everyone can step on the raft of salvation. That means religion has to be adapted to different types of people, different in terms of their class, and different in terms of their interests, their temperaments, the type of people they are. So Mahayana Buddhism was saying, we intend to adapt this doctrine to everyone in the world, make it inclusive of everyone, not just full-time specialists, not just monks and nuns, everyone. Wow. Okay, Kathy, any reactions initially to what the Queen is declaring there?
I mean, that's amazing. That's like, she's got it all, how do you do all the work in yourself and then all the work in society, and balancing in this way. Yeah, that's just, I love the idea that he sees her and that it's like she already understands it so well. That he said, all right, just go with that then. That's perfect. That she sees that we have to do this kind of balance. And again, not only in society, not only in ourselves, same as we were sort of saying earlier about societal transformation, but also the personal healing, or the inner journey. So no, I think this is beautiful.
Very, very good points. Are there others willing to read? Others willing to read? Sue, can you unmute and read section 7? Section 7, which is on the next page.
Okay. Can you hear me? I'm on because my computer.
We hear you.
And all right, good. Section 7, the universal Buddha nature. Each person, male or female, can understand and implement the 4 noble truths. Everyone has innate potential for enlightenment. The seed or embryo of Buddhahood can be cultivated through practices of compassion as well as through the insights of wisdom. This potential is our most basic nature as human beings.
Okay, a tiny little background. See, this is Harold's summary of a whole section, or a chapter, you might say. But it talks about the 4 noble truths. Briefly, those are the idea that all life is suffering, that suffering is caused by attachment or desire to things. The 3rd noble truth is that attachment or desire can be overcome. And the 4th noble truth is that there's a specific way to do that called the Eightfold Path, which has to do with lining up your thoughts and your beliefs and your practices in a certain way, and going over and over those steps throughout a lifespan. The 4 noble truths. It's about suffering and overcoming suffering, essentially. Okay, so she's saying, wow, everyone who's born human has got this Buddha potential. So, you could call this a giant democratization of Buddhism. Like, who is this available to? right? It's really making the raft large for all of humanity and giving all of us responsibility to find that Buddha nature and to cultivate it and make the world a better place. And are there others willing to read a little bit? Bev, can you read section 11? Section 11.
Excuse me. The one refuge that is permanent, steadfast, calm, and eternal. The wayward, immature, or nescient, ignorant, do not understand impermanence and the cessation of suffering. They say, the things I desire abide permanently. Worldly things bring enduring pleasure. My tastes and interests are my essential self. Bodily satisfactions are pure goods. But only the Buddha and our universal Buddha nature are permanent, steadfast, calm, and eternal.
Wow, I think she's saying, you know, a lot of people hold on to things. They conceive of happiness as possessing certain things or being smiled at by certain people or having certain cars or a certain kind of house, certain kind of clothing. They define themselves as their needs and their wants, and happiness means getting those met. So this is in a very simple way saying that's how most people function, but they're actually attaching themselves to things that are going to disappear, things that are very frail, things that are transient. It's possible to attach yourself to things that are not going to disappear, that are universal, all right? Some of them are within you. My goodness. Other observations about the message here? Comments, questions, observations?
Another comment about this one is she also says the Buddha is permanent, steadfast, calm, and eternal. And then in the Dharma, so Gautama Buddha, the one who she's meeting with, is not himself permanent. He wasn't even the first Buddha. So usually Buddhists think of the Buddha, like the historical Buddha, as, you know, we don't pray to him personally, but this idea that there are people who wake up, like a Buddha is one who wakes up. So this would be the fact that there are beings that have woken up and also our own ability to wake up. Those are the things that are permanent, but not like that specific person, just by means of clarification.
You know, it's beautiful to emphasize that. So even Buddha, a physical Buddha is not permanent because that Buddha died, right? But there were Buddhas before him and there are other Buddhas after him. So it's pointing to, you know, the Buddha is sort of like a station higher than an individual occupying that station. I think that's part of what, another way of saying what Kathy is saying here. Any other reactions to this section 11, the one refuge that is permanent, steadfast, calm, and eternal, as opposed to all those things that people invest in as the essence of their happiness or requirements of their happiness? Okay, who else is willing to read? I think I saw someone else a little while. Sally, oh, Maria, please. Maria, can you read sections 13?
Sure. The mind as intrinsically pure. Our universal Buddha nature provides us with the goal and the means of purifying the mind. Such purity gives us the ability to recognize and be devoted to the Buddha, to overcome all defilements of consciousness, attain nirvana, and help others to do likewise. The Lord alone has the eye. The Lord is the root of all doctrines. The Lord is the omnipotent being.
You know, I've had people that were really shocked with this language. You know, they have the idea that Buddhism has a very impersonal language. You know, the idea of the Lord alone has the eye. This almost sounds like Western religion. But so in Buddhist writing, at least as I've discovered it, and the same with Hindu writing, you have both impersonal and personal language, right? So sometimes Buddha is called Lord. Sometimes the Buddha nature that's even higher than him, the celestial Buddha nature, or the eternal Buddha nature, is sometimes called Lord. So there's sometimes personal language that sounds very familiar to say to Christians, right? Or to Jews or to Muslims. And then there's some very abstract language from time to time that sounds different than Western religions. Okay, any reactions to this? This is describing how to purify the mind a little bit, or that we need a pure mind in order to attain nirvana. What is nirvana? Look at the middle of the next page where I list the terms. Serene peace resulting from detachment from worldly desires and material goods, right? Serene peace, that's not attachment, but detachment from material things. What else? Cessation of suffering is another way of describing the nirvana. Transcending self-centeredness, spiritual detachment, the realization of Buddha nature, another way to describe nirvana, a blissful condition which can be eternal. So nirvana, as I'm understanding it, is both available in this world and in the other world or other realms higher than this, right? It's like saying we can have the kingdom of heaven on earth. We can have the kingdom of heaven after we die. It's sort of like saying the spiritual realm is vast, and we can attain degrees of it in this life. Okay, any other reactions to section 13?
I'd just like to chime in when folks are talking
Please,
about-
you should chime in all the time because of your special status tonight.
Thank you. This is the only night, otherwise I have to keep quiet. Yes, so with detachment, I think sometimes non-Buddhists think that Buddhists are pretty boring, or that we're like not supposed to like anything because we're supposed to be detached. So just by way of explanation, if you think about like, I don't know, going to your favorite restaurant and there are many things on the menu that you like, so they don't have your favorite one. So then you're like, oh, that's okay. I can have that other one instead. So it's that kind of detachment. It's not a like, I'm not even in the world at all. I'm meditating so much that I don't care what happens to anyone ever. It's not like that kind of completely being out of it. It's being okay with things as they come and not clinging to any one thing in particular. So I just wanted to explain that because sometimes
excellent. It's not otherworldly, in other words. Right. You don't have to be a monk or nun full time or someone who lives completely alone in solitude to be detached, right? You gave a very good example, very simple. You can multiply that by 1,000, what you just said. Detachment possibilities are endless in practical experience. Okay, any other comments?
I'm just amazed at her ability to verbalize this, and what an incredible experience it must have been to be around her. I just keep thinking.
I totally agree with you. See, I'm a lover of the language of the women mystics, right? They say it very well. I think it's partly because, you know, journaling as a spiritual discipline was practiced by pretty much all of these. That's what I'm assuming about Srimala. She was a word woman, right? That's why she got the words very quickly and could then teach them and amplify them. Same with the other women mystics we're looking at. That's in common to all the women who are very different that we're looking at in this course. You'll see they really wrote well, very eloquently and simply about very profound things. Okay, who else would be willing to read? Linda, surely you're willing to read. Please unmute.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, can you read 15, section 15?
Okay. Okay, section 15. The lion's roar of Queen Srimala. The queen appealed to the Buddha for wisdom about the three kinds of good children, and she is granted this wisdom. One kind of child of the Buddha unites with the Dharma through introspection. A second kind envisions the precincts of the Dharma. A third kind, with deep humility, gains the mental presence of the Lord. The Buddha declares the queen's entire discourse to be excellent, timely, and opportune. The queen then converted all women in Kosala 7 years or older to the great vehicle, and King Yasumitra converted all men in Kosala 7 years or older to the great vehicle.
You know, this is a lot to swallow. This is utterly amazing. I think what's being said is something like this, but you help me unpack it. But like at the very end, it's sort of saying the queen decided to teach all women who are 7 years and older some of these doctrines. Educate in a spiritual sense all the females. And then her husband, he was right with the program too. He's going to do that with the boys 7 years and up. Okay, you know, Mahayana literature is accused of exaggerating a little bit. Exaggerating. Like if you ever read the Lotus Sutra, you'll say, oh my God, everyone is getting enlightened here. Oh, there's too much enlightenment. This can't be true. Anyway, you have to lighten up when it comes to scripture. It's using hyperbolic symbolism, right? So I don't worry about whether how literally true this is. The story says she knew this was important enough to teach all the women, and she had a husband good enough to teach all the men as well as they could in the whole kingdom some of this this lesson. But even fascinating, look what's above this. 3 kinds of children. You know, I'm an educator and I'm interested in psychology. I always listen for stuff like that. Typology. That's my middle name, Harold Typology Rosen. So this is talking about 3 kinds of kids here. One unites with the Dharma through introspection. You know, I read a lot about this. Let's call that the intuitive type of a kid, the intuitive type of a person. A second kind envisioned the precincts of the Dharma. This is a conceptual type of kid, a little more. So one is intuitive, one is more rational and conceptual. Look at the third type. The third kind, with deep humility, gains the mental presence of the Lord. So this is, you could call that a devotional type of person or a personal type of person. They learn in the presence of others. So they, in effect, are bringing the Buddha right in front of them. They're making it a personal relationship to the Buddha. That's why they learn. Others are more intuitive, more conceptual, and then there's the more devotional type. You know, these types are similar to yogas in the Hindu tradition, but I don't want to get lost here. But so what she's saying is all 3 types of learners and young people can be taught this doctrine, and they can be end up being teachers themselves. They can grasp the Dharma in different ways. Okay, any other reactions to this passage? Okay, friends, look at page 6. I'm going back to Kathy, the epilogue at the top here, the epilogue. Can you read the epilogue for us, Kathy?
Yes. Buddha commends Queen Srimala's teaching of universal light. The Buddha returns to his chief disciples and instructs them on Srimala's Dharma talks. He requires them to remember and teach the inspired teaching of Queen Srimala, calling it a lion's roar of powerful doctrine that can unify the fourfold retinue: monks, nuns, male and female lay people.
Check out this fourfold retinue. Who does that include? It says monks and nuns, so they're highly trained Buddhists. And then male and female lay people, that's everybody else. So it's a very inclusive thing here. You know, another part of this, it's fun to do comparative religion. What if Jesus, you know, listened to one of his disciples and said, you know, you really got it. You got it so much that I'm going to teach the other disciples what you just said. That's kind of what this is saying here. So the Buddha, he's over there with Queen Srimala. He sees what she does. He's quite sure she gets it and is applying it beautifully in ways that he didn't even think of. You know, and then he goes back and says, well, I'm going to catch up the rest of the disciples on what Queen Srimala said and did. The essence of the Buddha nature of all people, including girls, including, you know, conceptually oriented people, practically and personally oriented people, all kinds of people. She's got a handle on that. So you could call it a giant religious education program. Everyone, you know, nurturing everybody's Buddha nature. Okay, comments, questions? please, Maria.
I just wonder if you have any idea or knowledge about what life was like in her kingdom. I mean, how did that implement in terms of daily life? And
You know, I wish that India had the same historical, what am I trying to say? You know, in Europe, for some reason, people got interested in historical details and dug everything up, right? India, as a culture, was more interested in the big picture. They thought, well, since things are sort of repetitive and cyclical, we don't actually have to have detailed history. All we need is stories of what happened. That should be good enough, right? So it really vexes people that have a high degree of historical consciousness. So what I dug in as much as I could, and it said, this is not implausible. The basic story is not implausible. In fact, it's plausible. Of course, it's exaggerated. You know, I doubt if every single female in the whole kingdom was taught this message. And also, we don't know. You're asking a good question. What would that kingdom look like? You know, and I think a part of the answer came with Ashoka, a great Buddhist emperor who came about 2.5 centuries after the Buddha.
That same kingdom.
Yeah. He tried to set it up. So it was basically a welfare society with service stations set up everywhere, like even for animals, for poor people. Take care of reports. Come back and tell the king whether people's needs are being met in different places. So trying to set up a Dharma society, a compassionate society, has been tried here and there, but I think we're missing some of the Western need for, you know, very sharp historical details. So in a way, you could say your question can't be answered, but in my mind, it was answered to a degree. Like, so she did really well. Her husband did really well. We don't know what happened, right? But it was a Dharma society. People were very conscious of needs and people's potential. That's what's a little bit different. The potential of everyone to develop their Buddha nature and become healers themselves, you know. Other comments, questions, observations? Okay, in the time remaining, I just want to look at some of these big concepts that are there right below the epilogue. The illustrious doctrine means essentially Mahayana Buddhism, or the great vehicle. The great vehicle means the large raft. I like that better because I can visualize a large raft that's big enough for everyone to go across the water who wants to go. Right? Buddhism adapted to many different needs. Great aspiration. Look at this. Longing to comprehend, realize, and teach and uphold the illustrious doctrine. And that includes all sentient beings. You know, it really blows. That means, animals too. Maybe some plants like, you know, flycatchers seem to have a degree of consciousness. All my relations is very close to an indigenous concept. Care about all my relations. It goes on and on and on in many, many circles, right? In the past, in the present, in the future. I put Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism there just to remind people there's the old Buddhism that emphasized individual effort, and then the later Buddhism that started to include everyone and emphasizes compassion, and it emphasizes that you don't necessarily have to be a monk or a nun. You don't have to be a full-time Buddhist to really be a contributor to a more compassionate world. Okay, I'm especially interested if Kathy has any, the Bodhisattva ideal. In fact, Kathy, just read that description of Mahayana Buddhism and tell me what's missing from it.
No pressure. Okay, Mahayana Buddhism, the later forms of Buddhism, called its whole movement the Great Vehicle, emphasizing grace or support by divine powers. The key virtues, compassion, liberation as accessible to laypersons as well as monks and nuns. The ideal of the Bodhisattva, who postpones nirvana to care for others. Elaborate metaphysics and ritual, viewing the Buddha as a divine savior. Yes, so that's my own tradition. So it is different than the Theravada tradition. So in Theravada, you follow the Eightfold Path, and it's the monks and nuns who are kind of working their way up to reach nirvana. In Mahayana Buddhism, the ideal is actually that you renounce nirvana, because you say, I won't go to nirvana until all beings are able to get there. And so that's the large raft, like we all kind of cross over to the other shore at the same time. So that appeals to me very deeply. Yes. Yeah. So no, I love it. And so this
explain this metaphysics and ritual. You know, the reason that's important to Mahayana is because they know that people, different kinds of people care about metaphysics and ritual. Different people want different kind of rituals. So in other words, the Theravadas say, oh no, Buddha didn't say much about that stuff, so we're going to get rid of metaphysics and ritual. And then the Mahayana come along and say, people need it. Right? So we want to attract the intellectuals who think, you know, in large concepts. They have a place on the raft. They can explain some things. They can unpack some of the Buddha's ideas, add a little bit of elaboration. So, of course, Mahayana would grow faster than Theravada. It appeals to more different kinds of people. But do you see why this is a particularly Mahayana text, what Srimala has offered? Because she said, the Buddha nature, everyone has it. Everyone? Wow. Boys and girls, rich and poor, men and women. Whether they're a Buddhist or not, they still have Buddha nature. How's that for universal? That's pretty amazing. I think, so I have a feeling Queen Srimala would have been a good interfaith advocate in her day. Yeah, like Kathy. Okay. Who else willing to read? Anyone willing to read a couple more definitions? I'm looking around. Please, Sheila. Can you read where it says enlightenment and then after that universal Buddha nature? Those two.
Enlightenment, the waking of spiritual consciousness, cessation of ignorance about the cause of suffering, insights about the transient and the eternal, a high degree of wisdom and compassion, an attainment viewed as either temporary or permanent. Universal Buddha nature, innate spiritual potential, capacity for enlightenment, the undeveloped and yet to be cultivated virtues of compassion, the womb of Buddhahood.
You know, that's a really beautiful image, isn't it? The womb of Buddhahood. So everybody has it. Everyone, but it has to be born. It has to be cultivated. It has to be nurtured. You know, there's a phrase here, enlightenment and attainment viewed as either temporary or permanent. You know, every religion gets into these little fights that become bigger and bigger fights. How long does enlightenment last? So they used to fight about that. It's hard for me to believe that people fought about that. So like they would say, some would say something like this. You have to earn enlightenment. It's hard to get to it. And once you got it, you can't lose it. It's forever. And others would say, wait a second, there's all these little mini enlightenments along the way. And you can have a whole lot of enlightenment and then lose it and go into the valley of the shadow of death. I'm making that phrase up, borrowing it from the Bible, and then go back and be enlightened again. So I have a feeling that, you know, Srimala was more of that type, developmental, looking at everything developmental. You have degrees of the fulfillment of Buddha nature. So you would have degrees of nirvana, different degrees of it. And you shouldn't fight about such a thing. You should just be busy cultivating it in yourself and in others. Okay, any other comments about those two big concepts, enlightenment and universal Buddha nature? All right, now the two things at the bottom are conceptually difficult, I think. Trikaya, the doctrine of three bodies of truth. The only reason I'm mentioning it here is it's a big part of Mahayana thinking. looking at these concepts. And then this, especially, and the one at the bottom too, impermanence and interdependence. Anyone else willing to read? Okay, I pick on Samantha. Can you read? Oh, you may not still be there. Well,
No, I'm here.
you're here. Can you read
Yep.
where it says Trikaya and the one at the bottom, impermanence and interdependence? Those two big concepts.
I can try. The doctrine of three bodies of truth, the ultimate body or Dharmakaya, the celestial body or Sambhogakaya, the earthly body or Nirmanakaya, referring to the historical Buddha, also called
Gautama,
Gautama, and
or Sakyamuni.
and then
Kathy, how do you pronounce those? Gautama? What do you say? Gautama.
Gautama or Gautama?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Sakyamuni.
Sakyamuni. See, that's the historical Buddha. That's the guy 2,500 years ago that Srimala met. But these other two, celestial Buddha and the ultimate body, or you could call that the eternal Buddha too, Dharmakaya, the eternal Buddha. But do you see that? You see the conceptual flexibility of that, to me, is wonderful. The reason I like it is because that makes dialogue possible between Buddhists and, say, Muslims, theologians, and Christians, and Hindus too, who like, the levels of reality. So to me, that conceptual development of Mahayana Buddhism made it able to find common ground with other faiths in terms of their theological and cosmological beliefs. I like that myself. To me, that's an advantage. If other faiths have a way of understanding each other, hallelujah, is what I say, right? So I like the fact that Mahayana developed in these three levels of reality: historical Buddha, celestial Buddha, who still helps you from up there. See, that means you can pray to the celestial Buddha. The historical Buddha left, but there's this, he still cares. He's up there and sees all things. That's why his ears are long. The statues of the ears are very long, all that listening. Okay, and then the ultimate or the eternal Buddha means people who believe in God, in various religions, can be in dialogue with Buddhists. Buddhists can say, oh, I'm interpreting what you're talking about as Dharmakaya, or, the heavenly Buddha, right? Or the unmanifested reality, or the unborn realm. There's a lot of other ways they can think about that. The source from which all things come. Wow. And then at the bottom, oh my goodness, this is part of Buddhism that's sort of consistent with science, you might say, or a view of a universe that's developing and evolving. Did I make Sam read this yet? I don't think I did. Sam, can you read the last one again?
Sure. Impermanence and interdependence. The important Buddhist doctrine that all things are undergoing transitory processes. Material realities are not essentially abiding, but part of a shifting causal network. Moral, spiritual implication. We should become detached from our desires, perceptions, and ideas in all the varieties, including the temporary view called Buddhism.
Everything part of a universal causal network that's shifting and developing. Therefore, you shouldn't be too attached to your understanding of any one thing. My goodness, including Buddhism. So you should always be undergoing a process of reform and paying attention to the details. This also, if you have that worldview, it makes detachment easier. Otherwise, it's very hard to be detached from things that you think are permanent. A permanent bad reputation, a permanent good reputation, a permanent good job, a permanent nice garden. So you have a view of everything in process, changing, shifting, you're less likely to be attached. able to step back and observe the overall prize. So, you know, the eye on the prize, the ultimate salvation, I think, for Buddhism is the enlightenment of all sentient beings, or the fulfillment of the Buddha nature of all sentient beings, everything developing morally and spiritually. Then we would have what other faith traditions might call heaven on earth, something like that. Okay, friends, we ran out of daylight. It's 8:30. I just want to give you a sneak preview. So next week we do time travel in this course. So we're going to go to Egypt in about the year 400. So this is about 900 years later than Srimala, over to Egypt in a place called Alexandria, the intellectual capital of the Western world at that time. And there was a lady there who knew everything. She was one of these polymaths, right? She knew all of Greek philosophy, and she knew all of Greek science, and she knew all of Greek mathematics, and she was very interested in what you could call political science too. How can we all get along? Justice. Very wise woman. And for her, mathematics was just a stepladder to spiritual awareness. That would be the main reason to study mathematics. Not only does it describe the physical world, but it teaches your heart and your soul about levels of reality. So she's really something, Hypatia. And she made some people jealous because of her wisdom and power and influence and capacity. All right, so I'm going to send you stuff about her immediately, maybe tomorrow. I'll send it to Kathy, and Kathy will send it to you, and you'll read it. And it might include a chart or two. It'll be about 5 or 6 pages. And we'll do what we did here. We'll introduce ourselves in a certain way again and look at some of those concepts. And the course keeps getting more and more interesting because we have more women to compare to each other. Their insights about spiritual growth and the application of spiritual moral principles to a widening world. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order?
This was fantastic. Thank you so much, Harold. Isn't Harold amazing?
Yes,
It's like
thank
a
you,
national
Harold.
treasure. Hey, Harold, this is fantastic.
Not
Learning
bad
so
for a man teaching about women mystics. Not bad.
Very, very impressive. We're so
Okay.
lucky to have
To
you.
be continued. Thank you
You're
so
lucky
much,
to have
everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
is beautiful. Thank you. Good night.
See you next time.
Night.
Good night, friends.
Good night. Thanks.
Good night. Thank you so much.